thank everyone for the opportunity to have served with you all on this TIF commission. I am going to resign as of right now. I feel strongly, as I have said before, that this project will be a great economic boon to the city of St. Genevieve, and I certainly don't want to cast any shadow over its validity or the good that can come in the future. And I would only say, again, thank you, and that legal advice is best tendered in a timely fashion as opposed to after the fact. Thank you all very much. I'm going to go take a seat.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy.
So we have a representative change from the county.
Tom, the commission wanted me to fulfill her chair for the rest of this short notice, so
All right.
I'll do what I can.
Well, thank you. Kathy, thank you very much for your insights and your help, and you will be missed from the commission.
Thank you.
Wow. I'll swallow that for a minute. Acceptance of the agenda.
Move to approve.
Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes of the last meeting?
I have, and I don't see any revisions, so unless someone else does, I'd like to move to approve that.
A second?
Second.
We'll move right into the review and discussion of the plan. There are a few amendments, and Chauncey, would you address those?
Sure. I think Erica handed everybody a new set of stuff, for the new plan, and it's really not a whole lot of changes in there. There was some cleanup. There's a couple typos in there. Toby, appreciate you contacting us with a couple issues, and so we got those taken care of. And it was nothing of what I would consider a whole lot of substance, but there was the reason we had to redo it because of some issues on page 20. And the main portion of that, it has to do with the Building Stabilization and Rehabilitation Grant or Loan Program. And what we wanted to do is add in there what type of projects would actually be included in that grant or loan program. And so I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but it's a lot more wordy than it was originally. So I wanted to point that out, so if you want to look through that. And when we added that verbiage, the page numbers all changed, so I wanted to go ahead and be sure that we had that in there properly. Originally, we talked about this as being for commercial buildings, but we took the word commercial out. And it could be for any building in the downtown TIF area. The other thing that we have added would be at the very letter from the Bank of Bloomsdale discussing the bank's interest in, and that was an attachment. Erica, did you pass that out today, or was that earlier emailed out?
It was emailed, not this email, but it's here in the packet.
The
Okay.
last page.
Showing the bank's interest in providing financing for the hotel project. We also included the attachment 2. Last meeting, we had when we took out those 3 properties we discussed at the last meeting, we did not change attachment 2, so we gave you that now. I think that was all of the.
Second to the last page, right?
Yeah, it was the whole attachment too, because
I'm sorry.
rather than.
Right. fair to pay job.
Yeah.
Got it.
I think that was it, wasn't it, Erica? Okay.
Any discussion? Our public meeting is scheduled
Next
for
Monday night.
next Monday night. Yes.
3 and 5. Where did the numbers come from? How were those numbers formulated?
I'm sorry.
In the feasibility study, in Exhibit 3 and 5, the real estate assessed value numbers through year 1 and 23, and then also in Exhibit 5, the retail sales. How were those numbers developed? What was used to develop those numbers?
Coming up with what our assumptions would be.
Right.
And again, as we discussed last time, we made some best guesses on how many dollars it would take in order to be able to generate the kind of money that was needed to be able to fund the projects for the first phase, or the phase that we're talking about. And those were some guesses.
They give you the answer you're looking
I
for.
mean, it's not, it's not real scientific, but I mean, we had all of those projects, and we tried to talk about that last meeting, that in order to do this much work, do the $8 million in projects, this will be the kind of the amount of sales or the amount of real estate development that will have to occur.
So I guess my question then is it possible that those numbers cannot even be reached?
I would say it'd be possible that they may not be reached. It's possible that they will be reached. I mean, I don't think it's just way out of line,
Okay.
but, there are going to have to be a couple projects happen in order to get to that level.
Mr. Inman, did you have?
Let Gary go ahead.
Okay, Gary.
Chauncey, I got a question on this page 20, which I gotta apologize, I'm completely blind on this. I haven't had a chance to study it till just now. The city intends to use TIF revenues to fund grants and loans. I was under an impression that everybody had to get their own loan, and it would be paid back through the increase in sales tax and/or property tax on this particular TIF.
I think what if we said grants and loans, we said grants are loans, is what we intended to say. I'm pretty sure that's how it's worded.
It is.
And the
Okay.
city has talked about the possibility of, instead of actually making a grant for a project, looking at the possibility, if circumstances warrant, of making a loan that would be paid out, being paid back to the city,
But that-
utilizing the TIF revenues.
And the
to
city's
make
going to
loans.
get this money where? To loan.
From the TIF.
From the revenue from the TIF.
So they may not really have any money for some time.
Right.
Absolutely.
May
until
not
they
be
generate.
making loans, until several years down the road.
While Gary's looking there, I think, but I'm gonna ask one more time, I understand. The basis of their sales tax is still gonna be on the last business, even if they're a year or two down the road, the last business that run that operation. If somebody come in and redone it, the sales tax based on what they paid in,
Based
like
on-
for instance, 2012, is that for the hotel, for instance?
Um,
Even if they don't get it going until 2014, let's just say.
The base, and maybe this is a good opportunity to kind of go through the program now.
I didn't quite understand that.
Yeah, would you like me to go through, I've given you all a handout, it says draft across it. I think
Yeah.
at this point, we'll kind of walk through that, and then, if you all have questions, I think your question might be addressed in just
Okay.
walking through this.
All right.
So, and if not, then feel free to ask it again. So, what you have before you is, we were asked to prepare a document that showed the guidelines for how this building stabilization and rehabilitation grant/loan program would work. We've been working with city staffs, other city officials, and Chauncey to prepare this. Again, it is a draft. The final program guidelines would be approved by the Board of Aldermen. These are based on recommendations made by city staff at this point. So I'll walk through this with you. I think just in one side note, one of the overall policy considerations that we picked up when we were talking about this program with city officials was that anyone within using this program and others using TIF financing would be treated equally, that everyone would be treated the same. As you know, under the plan, there is a line item for this program. It's $1.5 million. The hotel, the potential hotel project has been segregated from that and has its own line item of $1 million. This document before you really discusses how that $1.5 million program, the grant loan program, will work. But our understanding was that the hotel would have similar provisions when they request TIF assistance. And again, all of that is subject to the Board of Aldermen's final approval. First, the program funding. The program will be funded by tax increment financing revenue generated from each of the applicant's project sites. The base year on how those revenues will be generated will be determined as of December 31st, 2012. So any revenue, incremental revenue generated from that site over the 2012 base would be available to refund or reimburse that individual. There are some qualifications we'll get into in a little bit, but just I wanted to give that kind of background.
So you're really backing into that, so what's already been paid, even though it's not billed, that can go into this kitty for this money that can come back out again?
Correct.
On any business
So
that's
the
done at
base-
the end of 2012?
Yes, the base will be set as of December 31st, 2012 for the entire redevelopment area, and so it will be set for these sites as of 2012 as well. Now, the grant amounts that are proposed under this, again, there's a $1.5 million cap under the plan. The grant amounts will be limited to the lesser of 50% of the actual cost of the total project, or the actual cost that can be supported by site TIF revenues. So whatever revenues could be generated from that particular project site. In no event will a grant be in excess of $500,000. Now, in order to participate in the program, an application must be made to the city. City staff will review that application, and if recommended to the Board of Aldermen and approved by the Board of Aldermen, the applicant will be required to enter into a redevelopment agreement with the city. That redevelopment agreement would set forth the specific terms of that project. So it would have a project schedule, it would have information relating to bidding, indemnifications, things like that. Now, as Chauncey said, since there's not an initial source of seed money for this program, we are, currently the applicants would be required to advance all costs of their project. And at any point in the future, if monies are generated within the overall TIF and the city would like to put aside some money, there could be, they may consider changing this program to a loan program. Okay, but at this point, they would be requiring applicants to fund all costs up front or advance all costs. Now, once the project's completed, pursuant to the redevelopment agreement, the applicant would submit costs, evidence of eligible costs to the city for approval. If those costs are approved, the applicant would receive a TIF note. Now, the TIF note would be the amount of the grant, the maximum grant amount. for that project. And the note evidences their right to receive reimbursement if TIF revenues are generated from their site. Now, if revenues are generated from, TIF notes are payable only if TIF revenues are generated from the site. They're also only going to be paid if the TIF revenues are generated within the redevelopment area as a whole. So there needs to be the TIF needs to meet its base, the overall base, and the site needs to meet its base in order for payments to be made on the TIF note. Now, the payments will occur annually. Right now, we have revenues, 100% of payments in lieu of taxes, and 50% of the economic activity taxes generated within the project, within that site. And again, the base year is 2012. Now, TIF notes are not going to accrue interest, with the exception of one event. City staff recognized that there could be a situation where an individual site met its base, was doing very well, the project was doing what it was supposed to do, but the overall TIF did not meet its base. The language in this program is proposed that if that is the case for 3 consecutive years, that the note would then start to accrue interest. And it's bracketed here, the 3 years is it's a number that can be changed by the board. I have an interest rate at the current prime rate, but it's, again, that's subject to board approval.
Does that 3 years start after the completion of the project or start at the completion of the project?
Well, you wouldn't receive your note until the project's completed, so it would be after. So, what would occur is that if for 3 years, that is the situation where you're meeting your base, but the overall TIF is not meeting its base, your note would then, in that next year, start to accrue interest until such time as payments can be made again on your note. Okay, they don't want to punish someone for, having their project be a success, but the TIF as a whole not doing what it needs to do. As site revenues are generated, they will be set aside into a segregated project account for that note holder. All remaining TIF revenue generated within the redevelopment area will be set aside in another account and used for other projects in the plan. The TIF notes will be issued to the applicant and may only be assigned or transferred with the prior written consent of the city. I suspect that the Board of Aldermen would also require that the development agreement that applicant would enter into would also be assigned forward as well. Now, assuming that the TIF plan is approved, the obligation of the city to pay any amount on any TIF note will end on March 2036, because that is when the TIF ends. So in the event that the TIF note is not paid in full, it will be canceled at that time. There is no obligation of the city to use any other funds to pay that note. All risk of non-payment is held by the note holder. We also discussed whether or not multiple TIF notes could be issued on a specific property. We suggested that more than one TIF note could be issued on a property, but that the original note, the secondary note, be subordinate. So, it doesn't get paid until that first note is paid off in full. In the document that I have passed out, we have a list of what would be eligible renovation projects. This is not an exclusive list. Other projects could be added. In addition to those, all projects must meet on page 3 applicable city codes. There will be a public bidding process. They must solicit at least 3 bids on any project. Prior to initiating the project, we talked about this, the applicant will be required to enter into a development agreement. Applicants' eligibility, any fee simple owner of a property Any purchaser of a property that has a bona fide purchase agreement to buy a piece of property could apply at that time. We even have that leases of property could, with written authorization from the fee simple owner, also apply and make improvements and receive a note. There are some other items here relating to the application process. One of the items, there will be an application form that needs to be filled out. There has to be a project schedule, a listing of what projects will be financed. Included with the application would be documentation that shows that your site revenue is expected to generate sufficient amounts and enough to support the debt that is going to be issued for the project. Any project that demonstrates that their site revenues will exceed the amount projected to require to pay back the note would be given priority. So those are, projects that are really key to the city's goals for this program, which is revitalizing downtown St. Genevieve. Does anyone have any questions at this point?
Could you cover what would have to happen if a project came up that exceeded the limits in this document?
If, in the 2013 project under the plan, the hotel is listed as a separate line item. In the remaining projects, there is a large amount that could be for future projects. Built Fest, I guess, is one example of an additional project. If at that time a large-scale project comes online, the plan would need to be amended, come back to the TIF Commission, and a cost-benefit analysis would have to be completed. There would have to be an RFP to a developer with a proposal to the city. So does that answer the question, Arnie?
And that would be different than if it was a brand-new building going in, because the loan cannot exceed whatever it takes
Right, under our,
for the horizontal.
yeah, there is no bright line test in terms of a dollar amount for a large-scale project. But the $500,000 cap under the project, that would not, these applicants would not need to come back to the TIF Commission. The plan would not need to be amended for that program. The hotel is already contemplated within this plan, so that project does not need to be, come back to the TIF Commission. Any future project over $500,000, we would recommend coming back to the TIF Commission to amend the plan.
Can I ask another question? This hearing next week, and even somebody on this board, even though we didn't get the certified letters of property owners, do we have a right to speak at that hearing? A TIF board member or not?
Yeah, I think anyone can
Absolutely.
speak
Anyone
at the public hearing.
I'll say mine to them.
Okay. Any further questions?
I think the purpose of the hearing is for the commission to receive the input from any citizen who wishes to address the issue. And then certainly you can speak among yourselves.
Any further questions or comments before, this will be the last meeting before the public hearing?
I'm a little bit puzzled on, I heard you talk about new construction. How can you put new construction in the historical district?
Why can't you?
TIF would not be financing new construction. That's not like it. TIF could not finance new construction of the building.
Like if you bought a lot and wanted to put a building on it, that's where I understood.
It could go, give you the money to get the site ready for the culverts, the drainage,
Before
the
the actual
horizontal landscape, but nothing for the building whatsoever. You know, to get the property and the necessary drains and whatever, but nothing for construction of the building.
That get you there? Anything else?
Move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn?
So move.
I'm having too much fun. Let's stay here a while.
Yeah, there you go.
Is there a second?
We got this covered.
We're done? Thank you.
Sweet.
Oh, really?